Working?
Yep.
Okay, so for those of you that are here and then those of you that are watching at home, you need to move your desk a little bit, go ahead.
Alright, there we go. Good deal.
Good? Okay. The test again is 200 questions, all Scantron, no essay, no fill in the blank. It's 150 questions that are multiple choice in groups of 4. Hold on, sneeze. Thank you. And then the last 50 questions are either statements, historical quotes, song lyrics, etc., that are related to a certain theory. So it's not matching, it's like identification. So that'll say, like option A is functionalism, option B is SI theory, option C is conflict theory, and then option D is social exchange theory. And then you'll get a statement, and you have to match it, the statement, to whichever theory it matches most. So one of the guiding principles that I was trying to go over this class is how a lot of what matters in the type of analysis of sociology that you do is the framework from which you are operating under. So some people, I think, get way too biased on one type of theory, and then they won't look at it from a perspective from any of the other theories, you know what I'm saying? When in reality, it's good to kind of, in my view, it's good to use all of them, because all of them, I think, can give you information about a situation. So for example, remember how I said in the relationships chapter, family and religion, when one of the statements said, people tend to marry someone that offers somebody the same amount or the same amount of benefits as another person. Anytime you have a micro level analysis and you're talking about benefits, what's that going to be?
Symbolic interaction or social exchange.
Exchange, yeah. So micro, the first thing, if I was doing this, the song lyrics or the statements, first thing I would do is try to figure out, is it talking about big structures or big groups in society, or is it talking about small groups or individuals? Once you identify that, you can narrow it down each time. So if it's talking about big social institutions, big groups, big structures, is it micro or macro? That's macro. And then which two theories would that apply to?
Social conflict and then the structural function.
And functionalism. So mentally, if I was doing these tests myself, I'd think first, okay, is this macro or micro? Then once you figure that out, you can narrow it down. If the answer is macro, you know it has to be functionalism or conflict theory. If it's micro, it's going to be exchange or SI theory. So then, in general, you'll have to think on all these obviously, but if you see stuff like solidarity, stability, order, purpose, I'm not going to be so obvious to use the term function in there, but stuff like that, what's it referencing? Functionalism. If you see stuff like, again, I'm not going to use the term conflict because that's a little too obvious, but disorder, disagreements, power, exploitation, inequality, what's that talking about? Conflict theory. Okay? So you guys should be able to do this. This is essentially what all the music video analysis was about, and we've had questions like this. If you know the theories really well, obviously there's 50 questions, plus a few other ones in the multiple choice section about the theories. So if you want to focus on anything, know the theories. There's the tables in the book in each chapter that has like a theoretical analysis of each. It's almost always 3 columns. So Natalie said she was making a little chart to compare it, right? So I go through and I look at all the chapters to kind of get an idea. Think back, if you got your journals back, think back to some of the songs, because I'm going to pull lyrics directly. You can put it in the bin. I'm going to pull lyrics directly from some of the songs that we've analyzed. So that might help you if you look back at some of the songs. Okay? So, like I said, if you see that it's macro, you know that it's going to be either functionalism or conflict theory. If you see that it's micro, you know that it's going to be which two? SI or exchange. So what key words would you look for to try to identify if something's symbolic interactionism?
How people feel.
Yeah, feelings, perception, symbol or interaction, meaning, So how about for exchange theory, what key terms are you gonna look for?
Give or take, or like how one gives to another.
Give, take, benefit, winners, losers. Okay, now there's times where there could be language in there that might be a little tricky, but again, just think macro or micro first, and then try to think what's the focus of the thing. So let me give you an example of some wording that might be a little tricky. Say Haley and Connor are going out. Connor buys Haley flowers, but she hates flowers.
Because I really do.
Okay, because they remind her of something, I don't know. They remind her of something that she doesn't like. So she hates flowers, so to her, flowers are negative. But then Jamie is dating Sarah, and he buys her flowers, and Sarah loves them because they remind her of positive stuff. That's a big benefit to Sarah. What's the key analysis that we're looking at here?
Feelings.
Feelings, so what would that be?
Symbolic.
Even though there's like the benefit language as well. Make sense? Okay, so try to really break it down and see what's the focus here, what's it focused on. All right, I'll go back and give some more examples of those later, but do you basically understand how that's gonna be? So if you wanna focus on something, focus on understanding functionalism, SI theory, conflict theory, and social exchange theory, and applying those to as many different things as you can. Whether it's like the election now, or flooding in Fargo, or I try to use a whole bunch of current event examples, real life in high school, etc. Okay? And then also there'll be quite a bit of like musical quotes and song quotes on there as well. And quotes from, I'll pick some of the movies that people did and put quotes from that. Quotes from movies that we watched in class. There'll be a lot of examples of stuff that we explain.
Are the quotes gonna like have, if we've never like seen the movie, we'll still be able to figure it out? Or is it like you're gonna have to know the context?
The only way I would put something on there that you would need to know the context for is if it was one of the movies we watched in class.
So like one of the three?
Yeah, so Mean Girls, Glory Road, or Slumdog. So,
50 questions on the theories?
yes,
Alright.
yep, where it's, there might be, and that's not an even split necessarily, so it could be, I don't know, I'm gonna try to make it roughly an even split, but it might not be. So, it could be that out of those 50 questions, there's 20 where the answer is functionalism, and then maybe there's 15 for conflict theory and only like 12 for exchange theory or something. But I'm gonna try to make it, it's not gonna be like none of one is used at all, or only 3 or something. But it probably won't be an even split, because I'm not gonna literally count it the whole time I'm finalizing it, okay? Okay, so let's go through a few concepts then. If you look on SharePoint again, there's the review guide that goes over a lot of these. Did anybody print that off? Or look at it at least?
I couldn't find it.
Yeah, it's on SharePoint. So if you go to SharePoint, here's where the file's at. You go to my SharePoint page, and then did anybody look at the PowerPoint for Glee, the example? If you looked at that, it's in the same folder as the Glee PowerPoint. So Glee, it says Glee Project 3, and then there's also in here movie analysis, extra credit directions, wiki page, rubric, and PowerPoint rubric, and then sociology final review guide is the last thing in that group. Okay, so have you looked at those things on SharePoint before? If you can't find it, email me and I'll send you directions. But I'm looking at it right now, it's on there. So that has all of the concepts on it that'll be discussed. Now, a lot of the questions on here in the multiple choice section, I'd say there's maybe like 7, 8 statistics questions. I'm just kind of scanning through. 7 or 8 statistics questions.
And those are like from the book or the quizzes kind of statistics?
Yeah, yep.
So like the kinds that we would find in the back of the book for like the reviews after the chapters, or?
Yeah, most of them I would think would be in there. I'm not pulling out stuff that's really random. It's things that are kind of the focus of some of our units. So then there's also quite a few that are just identifying what a term is, like what is this term? And then there's a few that you have to apply a term as well. So I'd say maybe 6 or 7, like I said, 8 statistics, somewhere like that. And then out of the rest of the section, it's about half just defining concepts, and then about half applying with a few like people mixed in there. And generally speaking, this goes in order for chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. Okay, so let's look at some people first of all. Who is the main guy for conflict theory?
Marx.
Karl Marx and Frederick Engels in 1848 wrote the Communist Manifesto. The whole point of their work was talking about how inevitably over time there'd be a violent revolution where the workers who were exploited by the people that owned the means of production would rise up and seize power and create a classless society. That's the ultimate vision of communist theory. So if you start seeing stuff about revolutions, struggle, all that, that's kind of a cue to you that it's a conflict perspective, all right? Who was the guy that first used the concept of sociology, like used the actual term?
Is it, oh, go for it. I don't know, I was thinking Durkheim, but I don't think that's.
No. Durkheim was one of the earliest guys that studied stuff. What did Durkheim study? There are a couple different things that he's known for.
Functionalism, right? Or no?
True, but more specifically, he was one of the first guys to see that he was studying something with behavior, pretty tragic behavior.
Oh, suicide?
Yeah?
And like how being alone causes that. Like socialization, the less socialization you have, the more likely you are.
The less social integration you have.
Yeah.
So the less connections you have socially, the more likely you are to commit suicide. The other thing that Durkheim talked about a lot was the Protestant ethic, like Protestant work ethic and how that affected the Industrial Revolution. And then lastly, Durkheim talked about some of the changes in society as stuff urbanized. So remember, Durkheim talked about mechanical and organic solidarity, as well as the concept of anami, which means like normlessness, like without norms. Okay? So basically be able to identify some of the key people in all of the different theories. The other concepts obviously that we talked about in class a lot were manifest and latent functions. So you should be able to apply those in a variety of different situations. First of all, are manifest functions always good and latent functions always bad? No. So a lot of it morally is kind of a judgment call. So you want to take a seat and join us, or?
I have to take that chapter 15 quiz.
Okay. So a lot of those are, in terms of whether they're good or bad, it doesn't matter. Sometimes manifest functions are bad, morally sometimes they're good. Sometimes latent functions are bad, sometimes latent functions are good. So for example, in the school system, manifest functions of the school system include student learning, providing students opportunities in extracurricular activities. Those are all stated purposes of the school system as a whole. Some of the latent functions include students meeting other friends, peers that they develop relationships with. That can be good, but it can also be bad if those friends are like into drugs or whatever. Okay?
What could be an example of a manifest function that would have a like it's negative? Because isn't that like something that's stated usually?
Yeah, so let's take, for example, the hot button issues of the day. Two ones again are abortion and same-sex marriage. Let's say that you're very strongly pro-life, and there's an organization like the women's rights movement largely is pro-choice, most of them. So their stated purpose, if you go on like National Organization for Women's website, it says to defend women's right to choose. So that would be their manifest function. So most people that are pro-life would say that's bad. Make sense?
Yeah, so it's kind of like how other people interpret it in a way, because like not everyone thinks that it's bad.
Yeah, or take like the KKK, Ku Klux Klan. Their stated purpose is to make sure that whites keep power or whatever. So that's their manifest function in society. Yep. Make sense? Okay.
Who came up with the term sociology again?
Comte is his last name. His first name's Auguste. I think it's like European, so. So again, manifest and latent isn't always like bad or good, or one doesn't necessarily cause the other. But manifest is intended, stated, latent is unintended, okay? So again, what are the two macro level perspectives?
Yeah.
Conflict and functionalism. So what's the other wording for functionalism? Structural functional. What's the other wording for conflict theory?
Social conflict.
Social conflict. And then SI stands for
Symbolic interaction.
symbolic interactionism. Good. Okay, give me an example of something in education that would be an analysis that focuses on a macro level approach.
Like test scores? Because every school has to do that, so it's looking at the bigger picture, not just one school. It's looking
Okay.
at them all.
So like we did in class when we looked at different schools in the state of North Dakota and how they compared. Good. Okay, now give me an example of an analysis of education that would be focused on the micro level.
Like tracking.
Maybe explain a little bit more.
Like, cause it focuses on certain kids.
Yeah, so if you're focusing on individual students, yeah. Yeah, but if you somehow wanted to do a big meta-analysis of all the students across the country that are tracked, and then that would be macro, okay? So again, be able to identify in some situations, there's a few questions on here where it'll say something like, which of the following illustrates a micro level focus? And then you get 4 options and you have to pick which one best is macro or micro, okay? There's also a few questions about like critiques of different theories. So it would say something like a criticism of conflict theory is what? So what's the big criticism of conflict theory?
Is it inequality like that?
That's what they're critical of, but I'm saying what is, like if you're somebody that doesn't agree with conflict theory, how are you gonna attack it?
It doesn't show the good in the situations or like the aspect of society that they're.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't show the good in situations. So conflict theorists tend to be very critical of religious institutions, for example. If you're a conflict theorist, you'd say that religious institutions are often used to make sure that men have power over women, and make sure that homosexuals don't have rights. But they're not talking at all about the good stuff that different religious organizations do, like having bake sales and doing like Churches United for the Homeless and all the healthcare and developing countries that religious institutions provide. They don't focus on the good stuff, okay? So then what would a critic of SI theory say?
Doesn't look at the big picture.
Doesn't look at the big picture, good. So be able to identify some flaws in all of those theories.
What could be a flaw in the social exchange?
Well, hard exchange theory, number one, it's not focused on the bigger picture because it's a micro level perspective. Number two, they don't get into the perceptual realm as much as SI theorists would. So that'd be another critique of that. And then number three, I don't know, it tries to break things down almost economically. Because it tries to assign a value to everything, and that's really hard to do consistently. Because remember, with exchange theory, the belief is that, the analogy I often use is like The Sims. Because I think if you've played The Sims, that's a really good analogy for exchange theory. So in The Sims, you create a character and you run around and do stuff, and when you interact with people, there's like happiness points or something that you get. Have you played The Sims? Anybody? Is that basically right? I've never played it. My little sister was obsessed with it, but am I right pretty much? So then as you interact with people, you get these positive points, and if they like it, they get positive points too. If they don't like it, you lose points. Am I correct?
Yeah.
So that's exactly what exchange theory is. So exchange theorists would say that that's subconsciously done by most people. Most people don't like carry around a notebook and be like, oh, that was a good time. Natalie, +2. The other day when she was complaining about stuff, -4. You know? People don't literally do that all the time. But they do that subconsciously, is what exchange theorists would say. So people would say that they're a little too rational in their approach, maybe. Okay, let's see. Think of somebody that's. Haley's into hockey probably more than anybody else in this group, am I correct? Okay, what theory would say that Haley can understand hockey more than other people because she understands the language of it better than anybody else does in here?
That Sapir-Whorf.
Sapir-Whorf hypothesis.
Sapir-Whorf.
Good. So in that's focused on how language and culture are related, as well as language and thinking. So the Sapir-Whorf thesis has a few examples to it. Number one, you can tell how much a culture values something by how many words they have to describe it. You remember the discussion we had in class? So you think money in the United States, how many synonyms do we have for money?
What?
Okay, how many synonyms do college frat guys have for girls that are considered attractive? A lot. You can tell that they value it based on how many words they have for something. You can also tell how much a culture values something based on how many words it has for something. And then lastly, people that have a big language pool for some concept can think more deeply about a thing than other people because of that language pool. So when Haley watches a hockey game, she's like, oh, and I'm not really good at hockey, so she's gonna laugh at me a little bit here, but they hit the puck past the blue line, and then after that, the right wing came up and tried to do whatever, okay? I say I don't even know the term, she's laughing at me. So I'm a little bit more advanced than some people. Some people would be like, they hit the black thing with that wood thing, and it went into the net, and then this light went off, and everybody cheered, and the game was over. I don't know what happened. But, so, see what I mean? So when I watch wrestling, I'm thinking, he's gotta get lower, he should snap down, set up a shot, push-pull circle, and then hit a high crotch and spin behind to get his 2. And then Jamie's like, the dude grabbed his head and grabbed his leg and then got behind him and got points. So Sapir-Whorf would say, I can think more deeply about wrestling than Jamie because I know more of the terminology, okay? All right, so that's kind of chapter 1 in a nutshell. Chapter 2 was on culture, norms, stuff like that. What are the 3 main elements of a culture?
Is language one of them?
Language is one of them. There's more than, well, there's a few. But I'm looking at the question and I'm trying to,
Values?
values is another one,
Symbols?
symbols is another one, yeah. Okay,
What was that?
elements of culture.
Oh, okay.
What's the term for like standards of behavior which are used to guide members of a society and culture? That's a norm. Good. So there's 2 subdivisions of norms, 2 main types. There's other types like taboo or taboos, but what are the 2 main types?
Mores and folkways?
Mores and folkways. Somebody give me an example of a folkway.
Wearing your shirt the wrong way.
Okay, so if I wore the shirt backwards, people would look at me a little funny, but they wouldn't be offended by it. Now, if I taught the whole day, you ever see some people like pull, I'm not literally gonna do this now because it's gonna be on YouTube and my department members would laugh at me, but you ever see some people like pull their shirt up and then like wrap it around so that it's like up to here and then it's all like just being goofy, right? You've seen that before?
I've done it before.
Okay. So let's say that I did that and walked around and taught like that the whole day, just with it like tight and all wrapped up like that. That's probably violating the more. Mr. Steiner and I would have a conversation about that at some point in the day. Are you correct? Yeah. So and if I was like, what, there's nothing wrong with this, they'd probably send me home and I'd have to get a mental evaluation. There'd be some difficulties. So that would be violating the more. is a moray or a folkway, are those always crimes if you violate those? No. Sometimes, in some instances, in certain settings, if you actually do the legal thing, that's considered violating a norm of behavior. So for example, if you're in a fraternity and you're under 21 and they're doing like rush week and you get accepted and they have this big party and you're like, I'm not gonna drink, you violated the norm of that fraternity in that setting. Make sense? Okay?
And like not drinking, would that be like a full play then? Because it's just different, but it's not like finding anybody?
Well, I guess it depends on which fraternity you're in, which group. Some groups it might be a folkway, and some if they have like a shrine of people and like, you know, in the weight room, how they have like the amount of weight people can lift. If they had like a wall of how many shots people could take or something, and there's like a trophy that they passed around and all the guys got tattoos of their favorite beers or something stupid. I'm sure there's a fraternity somewhere in the country that they do this, unfortunately. But if you're in that fraternity and you're like, no, I'm not gonna drink, they'd be probably offended. And in some situations it could be, for example, in China, when Nixon went to visit China, he was the first Western leader to visit China after it became communist in 1949. After he gave his speech, they take shots. But that's like, it's not just like a drinking thing, it's like a symbolic thing. Like when they share the drink, it shows closeness with them. So if Nixon was like, I'm not drinking here, that'd be offensive for them. Okay? So it really depends on the culture that you're in and the group that you're in. Okay, let's say that Jessica goes over to Africa where she's in this tribe, and in the tribe it's one of those where they have like the wood thing in their lip, and the bigger the wood thing gets, the more attractive the girl is perceived, and they all like behave really differently, and she's just kind of, go ahead and put it in. She's kind of confused about what's going on. She's just like, whoa, this is weird. What's that called?
Culture shock?
Culture shock, exactly. What's the term for the delay in the amount of time it takes people to develop norms related to new inventions or new discoveries?
Cultural.
Cultural lag, exactly. So, one of my favorite skits on TV is called Late Night Hashtags. It's on Late Night with Jimmy Fallon. Has anybody seen those? I played some in class, yeah, that's right. So one of them was something like, my mom is weird, and one of the Twitter messages or one of the tweets that somebody sent in was, my mom thinks that LOL means lots of love. I figured this out after she sent me a tweet that said, Uncle Billy died tragically, LOL. So the mom thinks it means lots of love, but she doesn't know that it means laugh out loud. So the daughter gets this and then is thinking, what the heck is wrong with mom? Mom hasn't picked up on what the technology means. So there's some lag there. You see this in laws also. The example that usually gets mentioned in videos in the text is with like sexting and child pornography laws. A lot of the people, this is still in many instances on the books, but there'll be like a 15 and 16-year-old couple dating, and then they'll break up and the guy will send pictures around of the girl that she sent to him. And the only laws they have on the books to really deal with that are child porn laws. So that the guys get charged as child pornographers. That's an example of cultural lag too. Because they don't have laws in many places that specifically address texting or sexting, okay? So they had this guy on TV once that was like, oh, my life is so hard, and he was mad at his girlfriend that dumped him, so he sent pictures of her around, and he has to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life. He's like, my life is so hard, and it's this big sob story, and I was just thinking, that's a little, the punishment's pretty harsh, but you're the one that did this, you know? He was the one that did the behavior, so I didn't feel that bad for him. But do you see what I mean? You understand what cultural lag is? Okay. I'm going to give you a couple of different examples, and I want you to identify which is considered high culture and what's considered popular culture. I'll give you like 6 examples. You have to tell me which one's high culture and which one's popular culture. Ready? Coca-Cola.
Pop culture.
Pop culture. PlayStations. Pop culture. Ford F-150.
High culture?
Popular culture. Caviar,
High culture.
high culture. Opera music,
High culture.
high culture. Country music,
Popular culture.
popular culture. Taking your family to a baseball game,
Pop culture.
pop culture. You guys understand the difference? Okay, somebody tell me what the difference is then.
High culture is, more common among like higher or more elite people, and then popular culture is like just what's popular among the more common person.
Yeah, high culture is the upper class norms. Pop culture is for society at large. Somebody define multiculturalism for me.
One that like combines multiple cultures, like they take parts from different cultures and make it one.
No, not necessarily. That might be part of it, but. Multiculturalism is kind of a philosophical framework that says that it's good to have as many different cultures represented, as well as it says that each culture should be valued and promoted as valid, essentially.
Could that be like go along with affirmative action kind of? Because like that one of the Harvard videos we watched, and he kept saying like, is it better to have more diverse cultures?
Yeah. Yeah, multiculturalism as a philosophy underlies a lot of the practicality of affirmative action policies. So people that support affirmative action policies do so under the grounds of multiculturalism often. Okay, what is the term for when one culture's beliefs spread to another culture?
Assimilation.
No?
No.
That's when a person moves into a
Yeah.
culture and like fits with the existing culture. Starts with a D.
Diffusion.
Diffusion, okay?
What was that one more?
Cultural diffusion. Okay, what are two other ways that culture can change? So it's diffusion and what else?
Invention.
Invention?
New technology.
No, you're close though. Invention and technology are kind of the same. There's something that's a little different though. Western North Dakota is a prime example of this. No, it'd be discovery. So discovery is different than invention. You know what I mean? When you're learning the norms and values of a place and a culture and developing your potential, what's that called? Starts with an S. It's chapter 3. It's in the title of chapter 3.
Socialization.
Socialization, very good. Okay. In socialization, there's a lot of different theories for that. You have Piaget, Sigmund Freud, Erik Erikson. They all had different theories about socialization. What are Freud's three terms?
Id, superego, and ego.
Id, superego, and ego. So be able to identify those, like what each one does. So the analogy oftentimes that you'll see for that is the devil and the angel. What's the one that wants like instant gratification that's based on aggression and sexual fulfillment? The id. What's the one that's the internalized norms of society that try to like counter that?
Superego.
Superego, and then like you in the middle is the ego. Okay. So what did Piaget's concepts talk about?
The stages of development.
Okay. How many are there?
4.
What's the one where you first respond to just stuff in the environment?
Sensory motor.
Sensory motor. Okay, so be aware of all of those.
Was she the one that did the study on like how little like young boys and girls like when they're playing games, and the girls are more either more rule based and then girls are more like emotional kind of.
No, Piaget was a guy. Jean Piaget was a guy. The lady that did that was expanding off of a guy named Lawrence Kohlberg. Remember, Kohlberg did moral development. Kohlberg had 3 stages in moral development. Do you remember what those were called? Pre-blank and post-blank.
Conventional.
Pre what?
Pre-conventional.
Yeah,
Uh,
conventional and post-conventional.
Are we gonna need to know Eric Erickson's?
Not all of them, but just in general, you'll have to know what his theory is about. So for Erickson, remember, he had 8 stages, where as you age, you go through these different stages where you have a challenge you have to overcome. So you don't need to know, like, the last stage is like integrity versus despair kind of thing. Like, look back on your life, did I do a good job, yes or no? If you say yes, then you're happy. If you say no, then you're like, oh, you regret a lot of stuff. You don't need to know what each of those stages are. You just need to know that the heart of his theory has to do with that, the going through different stages and having conflicts. So anyway, that lady's name is Carol Gilligan. So to boys are more focused on the rules, girls are more focused on what?
Emotion.
Emotions or feelings, exactly. Okay, according to the text, what were the 4 main agents of socialization? Family?
Religion.
No.
No.
No, not religion. Religion was one of them, but not one of the 4 main ones.
Peer group, school. and
No,
media.
government was one, but not one of the main ones.
Peer group, school, and media.
Yeah, mass media, family, peer group, and school. And if you think about it, how much time do people spend involved? For some people in US society, religion might be more important than others. But if you look at the average person spends a lot more time in school than they do in church. Or a lot more time in school than they do thinking about anything religion related to. Okay?
What was that? Family, media, peer group, and what else?
School.
School.
And what was that for?
Main agents of socialization. Okay, if you re-socialize somebody, what's the key step? What are the 2 key things you have to do? Well, if you're socializing somebody, what are you trying to do first of all? What's the definition of socialization?
Integrate them into the culture.
Yeah, teaching them the norms and values of a culture, exactly. So if you're re-socializing them, you gotta get rid of the bad stuff first, and then teach them the new stuff. Those are the 2 main parts. Okay. When Charles Horton Cooley talked about the concept of the looking glass self, what does that mean?
Is that when you see yourself how others like the way others see you depends how you see yourself? Or is that?
Yeah, you behave and think of yourself in a manner in which you think other people think of you.
Yeah, that's what she was.
So if you're walking around and you're like, hey ladies, and the ladies are like, oh, you're so cute, and you think that they literally mean that, but they're being sarcastic, you'll be walking around like, yeah. So even though they all think that you're just an idiot or a tool or whatever you want to call it, okay? You probably know a few people like that. Again, don't name names, but you know anybody like that or not? A few people. Riley's nodding her head. Give me an example of a total institution.
Would rehab be one?
Rehab's one.
Jail.
Yeah, prison, rehab, good. Okay, what's the difference between a status and a role?
Status is kind of like a label of what you are, and a role is like how you act.
Yeah, status is a position you hold. Role is something that you do that's related to that status.
So like behavior.
Yeah. So I'm gonna give you an example, I want you to tell me if it's an ascribed status or an achieved status. Male, ascribed, teacher, achieved, husband, achieved, widow,
Ascribed.
unless you killed your wife. Yeah, if you killed your wife, then it's achieved, right? Otherwise, it's ascribed. Okay. What's the status that you hold that has the most influence on you?
Master status.
Master status, okay. What's the term for tensions that you experience that are connected to a single status?
Status or role conflict.
Strain. Single status is strain. Multiple statuses is conflict. Okay, in the example I just gave you, if there's somebody that walks around that thinks that they're the coolest person in the world, whatever, so they start like asking a lot of girls out, when in reality the girls are just being sarcastic, what's the theory that kind of explains how their perception influences their behavior there? They think I'm cool, girls like me, so they start to behave in a certain manner, even though in reality the girls don't like them. So they perceive something and that leads to reality.
Yeah, it's like real and consequences. What does it start with?
Yeah, a T.
Oh, I don't know the word.
That's called the what?
Thomas there?
The Thomas theorem, exactly. What's perceived as real is real and its consequences. You remember how I showed the clip of the guys that were in the hotel room, or in their apartment? And one guy walked in and he said, "Can you put the dishes away?" And the other guy was like, "Hey, chill out, man." Yeah, dramaturgical analysis. So what's that? How does that analyze society?
It's like on stage, off stage, and some.
Yeah, as if people are actors. So right now I'm performing as a teacher, but then later when I go home I'll perform as a husband, and then when I'm at home, like on my own, I'd be off stage, right? So I'd be by myself. Make sense? Okay, have you ever told a joke to somebody or like a story that's supposed to be funny and they didn't get it? And then you told them, well, you had to be there. Or has anybody heard that before or said that before? Okay, why doesn't the person get the joke?
Don
Because they weren't there,
Hearn, please
right?
call extension
So,
1805.
What's the key?
Don Hearn, call extension
What's the key
1805.
in terms of somebody getting a joke?
How much they know?
Yeah, they have to understand both the realities being presented. Good. Connie, you wanna check and see how much time's left on that? Make sure.
Looks like it's about to die.
Okay, I might have to go check out a different camera.
You want me to pause it or?
Just let it keep going, and then it should make I'll be checking a couple minutes and we'll start over.
You can't just plug it in, or?
No, it's gonna run out. I don't think it's gonna die. Well, hit stop once. Let me break it here. Let me see. We're about half done, I would say. I'm going into a lot of detail, which is